I literally can't think of anything more boring than watching me draw what I already drew. But here we are. So we're about to release the second book of Scatheless, which means I'm staring down the third book of Scatheless, which currently has no illustrations. The comic itself is on book 4 somehow, so I might as well start thinking about it. I like to add illustrations in between my chapters. I think it's a fun little break and a great way to show the characters in ways other than whatever they're doing at the time, and to show different parts of their lives. In this case, they're at the local pub, the White Shoulder, and music in the pub is a massive thing in Ireland. You should already know that. So I thought, hey, let's show them having a good night, playing music together, but we also want them to be in character. So I had a long conversation with the artist. I had a long conversation with Lottie, the writer, over who would play what, who would do what. We had already mentioned that Aiden plays the mandolin in book 1, so that was obvious. When I was doing the layout, it felt like it'd be fun to bookend it with Fionn and Eve, so I gave Eve the drum. Fionn started out with a giant accordion, but the concertina seemed to fit his personality a little more. I don't quite see him committing to that giant monstrosity of an instrument. I wanted Puka to join in, but as a shape-shifting monster, having him spend a long time learning to use an instrument like the fiddle or the harp or something. A harp wouldn't fit in this picture anyway, but it seemed like a little much, but you know, you want your boy to join in anyway, so he's got a tin whistle. What's Irish music without a tin whistle? Originally, Cara was playing the uilleann pipes and the bartender was dancing, but bartender isn't really in the story, and the writer felt the dancing character had too much presence in the image. So I switched it out with Cara, who her dad owns the bar, the pub, so she probably dances in there all the time, sings. Maybe she doesn't play an instrument. Do you play an instrument? I used to in high school. I think even in the attic, I still have a violin, electric violin, and bass guitar from high school that I have not played since, and probably never will. They're just going to rot up there with the bats and spiders. The setup for this image took much longer than I expected it to. Sometimes it takes a while to figure out how everyone's going to fit on the page. The writer didn't like that everyone's kind of sat in a line, but on a double spread page. There's not enough people to do a circle, and I don't know, a circle didn't feel right, so I just put everyone in a line. They're in a booth anyway, and if you see photos from people playing in the pubs, they're usually kind of like in a corner booth, so they can have microphones and everyone can see them, and someone can dance. And I did some research into the clothing, because I wanted the clothing to reflect the characters a little bit. The women were hard, because what the hell do women wear? Normally I rely on Lottie, because she's fashion forward and knowledgeable about these things. She's picked almost all the clothes in the series. But I thought I'd take a stab at it, and looked up clothing companies in Ireland like Dunn's and Topshop and stuff like that. Saw what's on sale and what they had models wearing, and went from there. Aiden and Puka. Aiden's old, very old, so he's going to be wearing something that is more traditional, a little bit of a flashback. So I got him in a tweed suit, but he's not as fancy as our boy Puka, because Pukas are known. Part of the Puka mythology is a handsome man dressed nicely that talks to you and tries to convince you that he knows you already, and will often... Aiden ended up in a tweed suit with a sweater, and your boy Puka in a nice 3-piece suit. At least they'll be easier to color because they already have color in the real world, and it'll give me somewhere to start. Color is so difficult for me. I never know what color to make things, and I don't know. I always want them to be a little more fun than the regular colors, but sometimes what are you gonna do? At least it's digital, so I can play with it. With real Copics, I think the first Saros book I did 3 copies of each drawing, because once you mess up with Copic, it's over. It's over. You have to start again. Some people are smart and like print out copies of their work, but I couldn't figure out how to print copies onto Copic paper, so I would just retrace it 6 times and recolor it and color really slowly, because I would mess it up every time. So digital is great. I can mess it up and mess it up again and keep messing it up until it's finished and it somehow works out. In the older mythologies, Puka often appeared as a horse, galloping across the countryside, knocking down fences and gates and destroying crops. In this form, they like to take a rider, usually someone drunk, because of course. They'll go on a wild ride all night long and shake him off in the morning, often right back where they were found. And because they were drunk, naturally, no one believes their story. But you can't, as a rider, control the Puka. The only person in history said to have done that is Brian Boru, the High King of Ireland, who lived from 941 to 1014. I was doing more research on Puka for another illustration I'm going to work on that just focuses on him, where I want to use a couple of Easter eggs from the mythology, mostly to do with the destruction of crops. People started leaving some of the chaff for the Puka. At this time of year, blackberries will tend to start molding or get frostbitten, and you don't want to eat them. You don't want your kids eating them. So a story developed that those were ones that Puka had spit on, so you don't want to eat them because they'll make you sick. Really, you just don't want to eat rotting blackberries and get childhood dysentery. In more modern times, there's still legends of Puka. And apparently he appears just before a disaster or some unfortunate event befalls you. And naturally, he's never around to see it. He just appears before it and often cryptically warns you about it. I found a fun story. Let me read it to you. From a report recorded by a folklorist, Owen Harding, in July 2011. So not that old. On Wednesday, the 1st of November, 2006, about 7:30, Dennis O'Rourke, a businessman and investor, believes he met a Puka. A strange and well-dressed man was outside of his front gate, and he struck up a conversation, claiming that he'd known Dennis for years. Went on to tell Dennis about his family, true facts he could not have known, going back about 3 generations, and how over the years they had lost and gained money. This man, who did not give a name, also said that the family finances were based on more than just heritage. They were also subject to the greater economy of a nation. Over the next couple of years, O'Rourke witnessed not merely fiscal... Okay, this quote is missing a lot of thes, and it's making it really hard to read. Okay. This man, who did not give a name, also said that the family finances were based on more than just heritage. They were also subject to the greater economy of the nation. Over the next couple of years, O'Rourke witnessed not merely the fiscal fall of the country, but his own financial ruin, including his business, his family home, and 2 other houses he had invested in. And they also say that when you have these conversations with Puka, they may go on for an hour. You think you've been talking for 5 minutes, but it's been an hour or 2. And that they disappear. They're just not there anymore. And you're left wondering if you were even talking to anyone at all. So a Puka never says goodbye. I feel like I've had conversations like that before, but never with a handsome man in a nice suit. Puka's legs gave me fits. I ended up having to pause the recording and look at all the pictures I could find of men sitting in chairs wearing suits. None of them, naturally, were quite at the angle that I needed. So I had to find a couple. They're all somehow in tall bar stools or sat in like really deep Adirondack chairs. No one is sitting in a normal chair with their, at a normal posture. Funnily, Aiden, I actually looked up kids sitting in chairs to see what they do with their feet, if their feet are dangling. My feet dangle on most chairs, so I totally get it. So yeah, Puka, I had to pause the video and play with his legs because it just takes too long to record. The time-lapse video of a double-page spread last time took so long. It ended up being, an hour video? And I didn't want this one to be nearly that long. It's always cold in Ireland, but I figured this might be this time of year, so in the fall, giving the girls cute cardigans, warm socks, sensible shoes, but a slightly similar decoration. I feel like when groups of people, especially women, go out together, they might dress somewhat similarly. I know when I went and visited my family in England, I swear all the women, it was my nephew's birthday, so all the moms show up, and they were carbon copies of each other. They all looked the same. They had the same haircut, same shirt, same shoes, same pants, and the same long cardigan with the belt. My sister was wearing the same thing too, but she had longer hair and a giant long necklace, so I guess at least she did something. The Elaine pipes were another thing that was hard to reference. Kind of a similar problem, like finding guys sitting in chairs, they always cover their crotch. So it was hard to find what Puka's hips and legs, waist would look like. And the Elaine pipes, when people are playing them, they're playing them like different ways. They're sat on their lap in different directions, and their hands are obscuring parts of it. Microphones are obscuring parts of it. So it took a while to reference that one. While I was researching and looking up photos of inside the pub, I was paying attention to what people were wearing. And noted in this research that it's quite different from what people wear to the club. Even in England, when people go to the club, they're all dressed up in their fancy little dresses with their high heels, and nice hair, makeup, jewelry, etc. But in the photos of people at the pub, they often look like they just walked in out of a field. Regular t-shirt, jeans, boots, raincoat, woolly hat. Just, your normal everyday clothes, because I guess more often than not, at the end of the day, you're just gonna go meet up and have a beer. Part of the reason the prep phase for these takes so long is I like to do research, and just with the clothing, give the location and the background a certain amount of authenticity and a real feel. I want you to feel as if you could step into the place where they are, or if you come from this place, that it would look familiar to you, and like somewhere you could walk into town and go visit. So I Googled endless pictures of inside Irish pubs, not American ones. There was a lot of American ones in the search results. And the older ones had a lot of really damaged wood paneling and worn in seats and stuff like that. So that'll be fun to play with when I get to coloring. And then the circles on the glass, actually, in researching this image, found out that the circle in the glass was back when glass was really expensive. There was window tax, so a lot of people bricked up their windows so they didn't have to pay extra for window tax. And when the nice panes of glass were made, there was a central part where the glass rod, where the rod was for manipulating the glass, and it was scrap. So, but instead of remelting it or something, however you dispose of glass, I don't know, they would sell it for cheap to lower quality buildings like, pubs. And so it was an affordability thing, a thing out of necessity, but now it's more aesthetic. So newer pubs will put them in for aesthetics and to look like the older ones. This would be the latter, because the original ones, it's just one circle because of the one rod and in one pane. So you find it in one pane of glass instead of, I think I've got like 4, which was a decision made at the beginning of the comic when I think page 1 shows the outside of the pub, and I wanted to keep it consistent. So there's the shot of the outside of the pub, and then on the inside, when Kara and Fionn are hanging out, she's kicking them out, there's a small shot of facing away from the bar, where there's the long bench seat along the back, and I guess a shelf along the top with old stoneware. So that decision had already been made, which kind of helped. I wasn't staring at this blank page thinking, what am I going to do? What is this room even going to look like? All these pictures of Ireland pubs are really overwhelming with their wall decorations, like the authentic version of what Cracker Barrel tries to do. But as I said, that decision was already made, so I didn't have to worry about it. I just had to draw it. And with these circles, you can see I've used the circle tool on the rough and then hand drawn it over the top. I've talked about this before. I like doing that because it feels more organic to me. I like the imperfection and the slightly squiggly lines. I've drawn it with my own hand, so it looks like I've drawn it with my own hand, versus having it all nice and perfect with the tool. I feel like it wouldn't look right with the imperfection and the lines drawn on the characters. Plus, I use a textured pen, and I've found that if I mix the textured pen with either clean pen or the tool, it looks really weird. When I was working on Saros and Scatheless at the same time, I used different pens. So I would start working on Scatheless and it just wouldn't look right. The characters wouldn't settle down and it was taking forever. I'm like, what is going on? And it would be the pen, because I'd be using a clean pen. I'm hoping all the wood in the background and on the floor will be textured. without overwhelming the image. So that's gonna be fun. When I color this, I'm gonna record that too and attempt a time lapse like this. Hopefully it'll be more interesting and we'll see what the wood grain does. So watch out for that. Join me then and we'll watch more drawing videos.